Good evening once again, and this is the second session of our question and answer period for 28 November 2008. And if part of the previous broadcast on abortion was cut off toward the end, after I'm able to see it online and see what was omitted, then I can fill it in. No explanation why some of these talks are cut off before they're finished. But anyway, there are a couple of other questions that have arisen, and one of them has been my broadcasts about science and orthodoxy. And the question of evolution always comes up. And the question about the age of the Earth. Some more fundamentalist-minded people are rather upset with the idea that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, or as we say, give or take a million. So we want to answer a couple of the questions of objectors about it, because when we continue with models of reality from the past, which have been proved to be wrong, then we always pose a paradox, an internal contradiction, really, between ourselves and reality, or what we're teaching our young people and what is actually true. Evolution is really a fact of life. And if one has faith and truly believes, there's no reason why it should be a problem. I meet hundreds of young people every year who are fully versed in basic program of evolutionary biology, which is foundational to medicine in our day, without which we couldn't really have modern medicine, and to other aspects of evolution. Now, this doesn't interfere with their faith. They are young people that I meet in parishes who are deeply believing and very pious, and yet are perfectly comfortable with the basic tenets of evolution. And to those people who object on really ideological grounds, or because of what they think the scripture is absolute in teaching, I have to say that you really need to reassess the quality of your faith. If these things really bother your faith, then it's your models of reality that you're trying to defend, and not Christianity itself, and not the scripture itself. The scripture is not absolutely inerrant in these areas. And we cannot say that every word of scripture was written by God, because if it was, God would not have made the mistakes that are made in the scripture. The idea of sunrise and sunset, the sun standing still to make a day longer, all of these other things that the fraud of scientific creationism tries to whistle past the graveyard with. You need to face, first of all, this reality that Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals are both hominids, and yet they're two different species. They're not the same species. And to this date, we have no intimation that, from the only source we could have it, of course, would be from some genetic source, some study of DNA. We have no indication that the two species intermarried or interbred. Well, they wouldn't have married in those days, would they? The only reason perhaps they would have interbred would likely have been rape or something like that, but we have no DNA evidence that that actually took place. And these are two distinct species of hominids. So that's something you have to accept, really. And the other thing is that almost certainly we're going to find primitive life forms on other planets. Perhaps even the moon Claudius from Saturn, which is a prime candidate for it. So these are aspects that really you need to weigh carefully in your arguments. And don't think that you're defending God. God doesn't need you or your defense. He doesn't need us and our defense. God does not depend on us to defend him or his scripture. The Scripture is about the meaning of life and the meaning of our relationship with God and with one another, and our struggle, our eternal struggle against idolatry. Most of the Old Testament, or the Hebrew Scripture, we should say, is taken up by recording man's great struggle with his own idolatries. And it reveals very little about God to us and a great deal about man, and the way man transfers his passions onto God when he writes about God. We know God only through Jesus Christ. There is no other source of knowledge or understanding. As Jesus says, no one knows the Father except the Son, and the one to whom the Son reveals him. Now, when we start arguing Scripture, between Scripture and science, we automatically place ourselves in very shady territory. People are always coming up with some kind of scientific creationism or scientific Bible reading, trying to prove that the Scripture is scientifically accurate. And what they're demanding is that science be compromised in order to fit their interpretation of Scripture and their models of reality, which they have based upon those interpretations. The fact is that from time to time we have to change our models of reality to conform more completely with reality itself. And look, truth is never harmed by reality, and falsehood can never serve the cause of truth. So we have to look a little more carefully, with more integrity, with more honesty, upon these questions, and put aside our ideologies and sometimes our models of reality, and realize that even the Holy Fathers spoke about what was known by science in their day, mostly by the great geographer Ptolemy and other scientists who were highly respected and highly regarded. We have to do the same, because our young people are informed not by philosophers anymore. You know, at one great era in history, there was a trickle down from the philosophers. The philosophers were quite lofty, but their teachings, ideas, surmises, philosophies would trickle down to society and over a long period of time actually change or transform society. You know, we have Cartesian ways of planning housing developments and developments in cities now, based on concepts and ideas or ideologies developed by Descartes. This is no longer the case. The trickle down now is from the physicists mostly and the cosmologists. And we have to realize that our young people are more educated in these spheres, that is, the ones who are educated. We are living in a semi-illiterate era in Canada and America both. But anyway, for the young people who are educated and for whom these questions have significance, they know enough about it that the mythologies, worn out models of reality that no longer match reality that some of the people have, the ideologies of the past, will just not do. They're not true, and the young people know very well that they're not true. But the realities that unfold do not knock them off the path of faith. What destroys the faith of young people is the ideologies and models of reality which people insist are the revelation of God, but are simply their own interpretations, or the best that science had to offer 1,000 years ago, or even a few hundred years ago. So this is what I have to reply to those who are upset about the realities of evolution. Evolution is a fact which cannot be successfully denied. It can be denied, but not successfully. And there's no reason why it should be troublesome to people who actually have faith, who have a living faith, who actually believe. Only to those whose faith is weak and whose belief is feeble.